FCS Checkdown. Yeah, baby. Come on. 2025. Nathan McCurry, Brandon Joseph, Coach Ron Jackson bringing the first episode here in 2025. We're racking it up. Big time, full huddle today. Conference chaos. Coaching carousels. Big changes coming to the FCS. We are your podcast and now video podcast for the football championship subdivision. We're going to be talking about a ton of stuff. We're also going to be joined by UT-Rio Grande's SID, Jonah Goldberg, here shortly. But before we do, Brandon Joseph, Coach Jackson, new format. Brandon, let's get a little life update from you. How you doing? Last we left you were in North Carolina with new baby and older new baby. How things going?
I still have 2 kids.
Okay, good.
I don't have North Carolina.
No North Carolina. Back to Georgia.
That's about it. Just 4 moves in 4 years, basically, essentially. So yeah.
Well, that's what you do, though, right? That's what you do for family.
I'm a nomad.
Well, Coach Jackson, it's great to have Brandon back in the state of Georgia. You are still in Tennessee. Give us a quick life update for you and your family.
We everything's good here. We fine as frog hair. My son has finished out his eligibility, and he's still up at Eastern Kentucky. He did find him a nice young lady while he was there, and he's decided to get married next year. So that was some exciting news for us. Yeah,
that's excellent news. Congratulations.
Yeah, been blessed. She's a great young lady. She's got her education. He's getting his. They're 2 sparrows in a hurricane right now.
Wow. Big changes for him, huh? Graduating, new girl, getting married, new job, all kind of cool stuff happening there. Very cool, Coach Jackson. Well, just for me, listen, I'm still living life. Excited about this 2025 season. I am wearing my Tottenham Hotspur shirt in honor of Heung-Min Son, who left the team today. He's after there 10 years. I'm a huge Tottenham Hotspur fan, so that's why I'm repping the Premier League stuff today. But it's all about football championship subdivision here on the FCS Checkdown, and we've got a very special guest. We're going to be bringing in the SID for UT-Rio Grande, Jonah Goldberg. And Jonah, thank you so much for joining us here. It's the very first inaugural season for UT-Rio Grande. You're the sports information director. I bet it's a pretty whirlwind atmosphere right now around the university. And thank you so much for coming on. Uh-oh, hang on a second. I muted you, and I didn't turn your volume up. Hang on 1 second. I'm getting you, I think. Hang on, Jonah. Wait for me, baby. Wait for me. See, we're in this whole new process. We got, we have a new platform we're working with, and somehow I have muted Jonah, and I have no idea how to unmute him. Brandon, I need your assistance. All right, let me see. I'm going to go back here. Jonah.
Wonder if he'll unmute himself.
No, it's me. I can see his thing says muted. All right. I don't want to mute the guest. I want to, okay. Hang on. Wait for it. Jonah, can you call me back? Call me back so I could dump you into the thing, and then we'll get you back on. All right, buddy. All right. Well, our first hiccup of the season. Jonah's calling me back, and let's see if I can get him on. It is assign him to guest number 4. All right. See if we can hear you now. Jonah, you there? Oh my goodness. All right, Jonah, have you muted yourself by any chance? No, he says no. All right.
Hey, there I am.
There you are. All right. You're here. All right. That was my fault. Jonah, it must be a whirlwind around UT-Rio Grande right now. First of all, introduce yourself to Brandon and Coach. We got a chance to talk earlier and just kind of talk about your path to UT-Rio Grande and what's going on there in this new FCS program?
Sure. So I've been full-time with UT-Rio Grande Valley since 2011 when it was UT Pan American. And I also had a brief stint in 07-08 when I was part-time in the communications office and broadcasting basketball and baseball on a per-game basis. And in the middle, there was some time in minor league baseball and G League basketball, and returned back in November 2011 to a Division I program, mostly in name, to be honest. It was independent, so one of only a few. It was definitely a lower resource institution. Our full-time staff probably numbered in the 30s. And now we fast forward 14 years, and our full-time staff doesn't fit in most of the rooms on campus. And if you take out the coaches, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, like even if you take out the coaches and go to support staff, I mean, we probably have over 100, and like my team has grown exponentially, and we have 18 sports. We're in a conference. We're stable. We were a school that you wanted to steal into your conference when we went from the WAC to the South. I mean, we were somebody that, we got to have UTRGV. Look at all their growth. Look at all their investing. That, I mean, we just put in like $180 million in 13 capital projects.
Wow.
All at once. Like, we had one capital project over from the mid 1970s through about 2013-ish. We didn't have a single capital project. And then we built our soccer and track and field complex in 2014. And then over the last few years, we decided to upgrade everything while starting a football program because, we weren't busy enough.
That's incredible. I'm going to pop up on the screen here just a little bit about the program, your logos, your schedule. Just kind of talk about year one here and what it's been like for you and this coaching staff and the facility staff, the SID staff to kind of really start this thing from scratch.
I mean, it's funny. We've been talking about it for so long. I think conversations really started in 2016. There was a feasibility study, but at the time, it wasn't the right time for the university. And I think what everybody needs to remember is when you start a new football program, especially at the Division I level, it's not an athletics decision. It's a university thing. It's a student life, campus life initiative. So of all the times that we really started to put this in high gear, it was actually during COVID. Because UTRGV, unlike most institutions, came out of it stronger. And our president, Dr. Guy Bailey, man's a genius. He had taken, he and his staff and his cabinet had taken the steps as if they knew this could happen one day to prepare the university, to put us in such good financial footing that if the unthinkable happened and suddenly you needed financial savings, like how many schools do you hear about that were laying people off or furloughs? And we were fine. Not a single layoff or furlough during the pandemic. And in fact, our enrollment grew, and we're now around 34,000. I mean, when I got here, we were 14,000. And we just continuously grow. And so we hired Coach Travis Bush, to be our head coach in 2022 in December. And it's great. The Google map of Robert and Janet Vaquer Stadium is actually, they got the picture the day of the press conference. You can see the chairs on the field and everything.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's a nice little time capsule, though I really hope they update it because the stadium looks very different because we've been renovating it. But maybe they'll wait a few days. Maybe they'll wait till August 30th when we have 12,000 people in the stadium and an incredible atmosphere. So when we hired him, he brought a countdown clock into the office, and it was 900 something days on it. And he always talks about how he would look at that and be like, oh my God, I got to get to work. And to be honest, I'll be honest, I'd look at it and be like, okay, it's really far away. And even like as you know, and then he started hiring staff, and I'm like, okay, we got a few people here. They're out recruiting. He would do some interviews, and he would always say, like, as I was setting up some of these like longer form interviews, he'd say, "Yeah, now's the time to do it because now's when we have time." And I'd be like, "Well, yeah, okay." And last year we had players on campus. He had at one point said he was hoping to have like 40 or 50, and we ended up with 80 or 90.
Wow.
We found a lot of really good players who freshmen in Texas who were overlooked, and probably because of the transfer portal,
Right.
because you're waiting. So the freshmen weren't getting their opportunity. So they came to us, and we had a really competitive fall. And then in the spring, we brought in our first group of transfers, brought in some more into this fall. And, we still have a pretty decent number of kids who made it from last year into this year. And then a nice mix. We were able to balance out the classes pretty well, where we have 10 grad students and we have seniors and juniors and sophomores. So it's not just all freshmen. And, now we're at that point where we're less than 30 days out from that first game. And, I went on vacation in July, and the day I came back, I felt like I went from 0 to 100, and I haven't stopped since, because we just like everything is happening. And there's just so many things to get done to have this first program. Like for me, I built a media guide from scratch, and I made it different from all the other guides that were doing, because it wasn't like, well, it's this guide that I don't know how many people still look at media guides these days anymore. Anyway, it was like, this is the first. Oh, you do. Well, but I'm glad somebody does. But I was like, this is the first one. It's got to be like, it's got to be great. And then a lot of schools have gone digital with their game day programs, but a lot of our fans want that souvenir from the first season, especially the first game. And we're going to print out 7 different game day programs for our 7 home games. So it's like designing this, and what should the contents be? And they're trying to sell ads. So then I'm shifting the contents around as my pages get taken up, and what has to be in there? What can we combine? And there's things like that. And then, the rest of the department keeps humming along. So it's a lot. The last 2 weekends, I've brought home my external monitor, which I've never done in my life, just so I could be more efficient working from home over a weekend.
Yeah, one monitor's for sissies. I'll turn this over to Brandon to let him ask you a question. But Brandon and I went through this with Kennesaw State. Ground up, started in 2013 and 2015. They started their first season at football, and we got to see it. And it is a taxing project for those support staff. Brandon, what you got?
Yeah, I wanted to touch on that as well. You mentioned some of the renovations you're doing to the stadium, Vaquer Stadium. You guys acquired that during the process of launching the football program, but I don't think people realize, and I want you to touch on, what exactly y'all have to do from start to finish. You got to worry about uniforms, field design, locker rooms, and putting all that stuff in. So can you kind of go through the timeline and what that process was like, and just how many people had to sit in a room and come to a decision on even the most minute things to get a football program off the ground?
Right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because the running joke between Coach Bush and our athletic director, Chase Conk, early on was we had a football program in a box. You had a ball, there was a helmet, and it's all in a box, and our program fit literally in a box. And that was it. And I remember one of the early hires was Brian Gamble, who's assistant head coach and defensive coordinator. And Gamble helped to start the program in Incarnate Word. Coach Bush had been through starting the program at UTSA. His director of football ops, John Simmons, was actually a quarterback on that inaugural program at UTSA. And then our offensive coordinator, Jeff Bowen, he was part of that UTSA staff also. So we had and they were all among the first hires. So we immediately had people who have been through this, who had a better idea of what needed to be done and what we needed. And they joke, I think when Coach Gamble came over, okay, you got to order everything. And I think that's something that's really struck me, like even talking with our equipment coordinator, Luis Mendoza, who he was one of the earlier hires too, as you can imagine, and just thinking like, how did you remember to get everything? And he just said, I mean, because I had to, like it wasn't really an option. like as I stare out at the practice field sometimes, and then I see, you got the blocking dummies, and you've got the little black and yellow pads that you strap on, and just like making sure you have that, and all the things they use in drills, and all the different pieces of equipment that every player needs to wear, and then knowing how many to order, and then I mean shoe sizes, right? Like how do you know how many shoe like you can get shoe sizes from guys and they're not going to be quite right because either they gave you their size in a different brand or they thought their size was one thing but well it wasn't, and you need to be ready for that, and that's to me feels like such an overwhelming task, and I was very happy to not actually be involved in having to figure out all the equipment that needed to be ordered just from that standpoint. But I mean gosh, we were planning out the broadcast just for ESPN Plus on that end, thinking, okay, well, what all not only the equipment we need, but the stadium, we've got to run fiber. Okay, well, what kind of fiber do we need? How much of it do we need? Do we need backups? Like, where is this stuff running? What specific locations to get our audio and video everywhere? And that was a lot, and it took us months to go through these very specific equipment that we needed. And then all of a sudden, as we're putting our radio deals together, I was like, hey, wait a minute, do I need anything for that? And you start thinking about all that, and it's every time you think, oh yeah, I think we're good, you think, oh wait a minute, I need that too.
Well, and as we're going to turn to on the field football, what is your network going to look like as far as, you mentioned ESPN Plus, you're in the Southland. What is your network going to be, availability going to be for those UT-Rio Grande fans that want to watch your football, listen to your football?
Yeah, sure. So all of our home games and Southland games are on ESPN Plus. So this year we only have one game not on the Plus. We go to Prairie View A&M week 2. That's on SWAC TV. And that's ESPN Plus only on in the US. So the Southland created something called Southland International, which allows international fans to be able to watch. And it also gives us the ability to easily clip live highlights so we can share those on social media, which is a huge thing, and send them back to our local TV stations. Fans are able to listen both locally and in Laredo, which is a couple of hours west and a little north of here as well. But UTRGV does have a presence there, so we found it important to get ourselves on in that market as well. And so radio in English for every single game. And then
Wonderful.
We're going to do Spanish radio locally, and it bleeds into Mexico as well, pretty far. And we'll have that on 2 different stations. So, and that's just for home games. So that's a pretty big thing.
That is wonderful. That is absolutely the way it should be, is that availability for those fans. And you and I kind of talked a little bit. It doesn't matter if 100 people are listening or 5 people listening or 5,000 people listening. You put on the product that people deserve, that those athletes deserve, that the coaching staff deserves, that your staff deserves, that is representative of your university, that's professional, well put together, and y'all could be something you can be proud of. And it sounds like you guys are doing that. Coach Jackson, I'll turn to you. You're the football mind. This is a new program coming into the Southland, inaugural season. And Coach, what do you feel like your concerns would be as starting a new program, asking Jonah where their focus may be for the first year?
Well, I tell you this, Nathan, that from everything that I've seen, I've watched them from the time that they announced they were going to have a football program, and they've done everything right. I mean, I can't think of a better introduction to Division I FCS football than what they've had. They've got a tremendous buzz going around. I mean, my real question would be, what should the fans kind of expect on game day?
Yeah, and our game day atmosphere is going to be amazing. We've been sold out of season tickets since September.
Wonderful.
And that's about an allotment of 6,000. And then you got 25% of our stadium is reserved for students who get in free. And so that was important to us, that the students had to pass a referendum in 2021 agreeing to a fee increase in order to make this happen, and they did overwhelmingly. So we wanted to make sure that a substantial amount of the stadium belonged to them, and they'll have their own tailgate area as well. Tailgating begins 5 hours before kickoff. There's a lot of tailgating spots. Some of it's turnkey, some of it's you bring your own. And it's going to be such a big party out there. We have a corporate sponsor tailgating area where, different sponsors are going to do different things. I've heard some might be barbecuing. There may be music. There may be other giveaways. So it's an opportunity for fans to walk through and, see what they're all about. There'll be a Vaqueros walk, and that's about 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think, before kickoff.
Right.
And I know the students will have a pep rally about an hour and a half before, and gates will open about an hour and a half beforehand. You get in there, seat a little over 12,000, although we expect to have over 20,000 on the grounds because anybody can come tailgate for that first day. And we'll actually have some screens where you can watch the game in the tailgating zone if you couldn't get in. So that'll be big for some of our fans, and especially for our students, because 34,000. We wanted to make sure that they're able to really enjoy the festivities and watch if they weren't able to get in for a specific game. And the marching band will perform. We have a brand new marching band. You start a football team, we got to start a marching band too.
Heck yeah.
So,
all right.
We did that, and they're going to walk in. They're going to see a brand new video board. So this stadium we're in, it was built in 2016 to host United Soccer League action, and we acquired the stadium with the help of the city of Edinburgh last year, and then Robert and Janet Vacker donated $20 million, and that has gone a long way toward helping to do all the renovations we needed to make this a football stadium. Fans who have premium seating, it's kind of unique. They can actually sit in field level suites. All the suites are field level because it was built for soccer. But what we did to make sure the sidelines were good is we lowered the field 7 feet. And
no kidding.
Yeah, because otherwise you weren't going to be able to see over some of these guys.
Yeah, a lot of those. Kennesaw State was exactly the same thing. They built a stadium here for the women's soccer team, the Atlanta Beat, and it was taken over by, I think they leased it, Kennesaw State did, but they had to, basically the first maybe 6 rows, you couldn't have fans sit because it is so field level. Line is obstructed by the players.
Yeah, so that's, we talk about all the things you have to think about, right? Yeah. That was one of the things we were thinking about. How are fans going to be able to see from these best seats in the house? So that was one of the things we immediately took care of, and we're kind of building out. We added other premium seating and student seating around. There are some new elevators to get up to the seating level, and concessions and team store that have been really built out. So I think fans are going to get in, they're going to see that, and they're just going to be like, wow, look at this place. And then, just after 7:00, opening kick, and hopefully the start of winning the very first game in program history.
Well, we want to be the first to really officially welcome you to the FCS. It has been a treat to talk to you. Best of luck to your football program. We're going to be paying attention to you, and I hope we get a chance to speak to you, the head coach, Coach Bush, and maybe some players, and I'll reach out to you as the season continues. But best of luck, man. Honestly, it seems like you're a really good dude. Y'all are doing it the right way there at UT-Rio Grande, and man, I'm getting chills, man. It's football season. It's that kind of, that feeling. It's almost here, and you guys kicking off. It reminds me of that Kennesaw State kickoff. They played East Tennessee State at a neutral site, but it started a great tradition, a new thing at Kennesaw State, because Brandon and I both went to Kennesaw State. I think he's wearing his KSU swag right now, but it is something special, and you're a part of it, and you're going to get a chance to watch that grow. Hey, congratulations for all the success you've had. Best of luck as the season goes on. Don't be a stranger. Please reach out to us if we can help the program, promote the program in any way.
I appreciate
it. If I get a Vaquero hat or something like that, I'd replace this one with it.
That's another thing. You're going to have to deal with that crap. When people asking for gear, hey, we did it when we were on broadcast. We were like, hey, can we not get an extra polo, another hat? You know what I'm saying? That is.
If there's any hoodies lying around,
oh
I'll
my
take one.
God, Jonah, I'm so sorry.
Vaqueros go.
Hey, at least they're not asking for tickets, because whenever I get that, I say, I really can't help you.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Jonah, thank you so much, my man. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Best of luck, and I'll be talking to you soon. And go Vaqueros, huh?
Peace up.
All right, guy. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great evening, gentlemen. UT-Rio Grande, the Vaqueros into the Southland. It is fun to talk about these new programs. We're going to talk about New Haven next week. The Chargers are going to be an initial program, FCS program this year as well in the NEC. Let's get to some other topics as we go through the FCS checkdown, and it's going to be conference realignment is a topic that listen, there's been movement around the FCS. Mentioned the Patriot League becoming basically CAA light, kind of, with Villanova now saying they're moving over there. William & Mary's already there. Richmond's going to be playing there this year. Brandon, your thoughts on some of the realignment, especially that CAA Patriot weird relationship where the CAA looks like they just fumbled the football and their conference is not what it used to be.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit last year with the CAA and the change that were going on there. A lot of influx a couple of years ago of teams moving in there, and then now teams moving out. I think part of this also has to do with the ever-changing landscape of this NCAA and this agreement. If you opted in, you're going to have to rev share with players. So a lot of FCS schools are now looking at, okay, what's the best option for us? If we're going to have to split some money and pay players out of our own pockets, where can we save costs? And it's not going to be eliminating sports. I think we're seeing a lot of pushback on that, eliminating sports and scholarships and players being grandfathered in and things like that. So this whole landscape shifting, a lot of schools and universities are now looking at, okay, let's find that regionality. So for all the things that we complain about the FBS level with Oklahoma and Texas being in the SEC and not the Big 12 and losing that regionality of this, I think you're going to get back to that a little bit more at the FCS level. Where can I save money, eliminate costs, eliminate travels? There's no need for, Villanova to be traveling all the way down south, a little bit more west than they need to travel. Find schools in your immediate area. I hate to phrase it this way. Find bus ride schools. You want to eliminate the flights and stay as many. 4 buses still cheaper than chartering 1 airplane. And I think for these schools, that's where we're seeing a lot of that positioning. And again, also, it's going to be, the concentration of wealth as well. Let's get there. Let's, be the top dog in one of these conferences, because who knows where this is going to shift. And
Right.
Do you want to be maybe the 3rd or 4th best team in the CAA, or do you want to be number 1 in the Patriot League? Well, both ways get you in the playoff. One of them is just guaranteed.
Coach Jackson, this is a kind of a regional change with the CAA. They were the powerhouse here on the East Coast, and James Madison leaves. Delaware's now gone. They're not what they used to. They're a skeleton of what they used to be, and they started bringing in a bunch of these, I don't want to say low, Bryant, Monmouth, teams that just didn't seem to fit that mold. And then you've got William & Mary, Richmond,
Quantity
Villanova.
over quality.
Right. Quantity over quality. You've been around college football and especially the FCS for a long time. What's your thoughts on the CAA's handling of this transition for them?
Well, the CAA probably tried to follow the same mode as Conference USA has done at the FBS level. It's just hadn't worked out for them, mainly because of the expanded travel. You really don't build up any rivalries or anything like that. So I like the tighter footprint. You're going to get more regional based games. I mean, honestly, and I'm not comparing the FCS to the SEC or anything like that, but that's what the SEC did. They were all tight footprint games, and they grew from there. Once the rivalries start, once the support for the rivalries start, then you can grow. So honestly, it's a much better move for the FCS level. Like Brandon said, the costs have to go down. And once teams start concentrating more regionally and your rivalries build back up and things like that, you'll see attendance, 10, 15, 20,000 at these FCS games, which is what they need.
Yeah, and that may be, like you saw Stephen F. Austin going back into the Southland because they had those natural rivalries, even though I thought the WAC fit them pretty well, and the UAC is a growing conference, and then them leaving was a little bit unusual, but that's exactly what you said. Back to some rivalries that were traditional, and they can have that. They're never going to have the Battle of the Piney Woods, right? But now they have SLU. They've got those teams that are pretty close to the border of Texas that you can bring some Lamar. They're in Texas, in Beaumont. You can bring that rivalry back. So it is a good point. And the travel, it is an issue at the FCS level, right?
Yeah. If you've opted into the house settlement where you're going to share revenue, then the only way to share revenue is to generate some revenue. The easiest way for a FCS school to generate revenue is put butts in the seats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
the easiest way to generate revenue also is not to spend money.
Hey,
nobody's busing. Nobody's busing to Southern Utah. Nobody's busing to Utah Tech. You got to fly. Those are flying games. And you mentioned Stephen F. Austin. It looks like, they can bus it basically everywhere in the Southland. Some of it's going to be very uncomfortable, but push comes to shove, you're bussing.
Yeah. And Tarleton's another one of those teams that it seems like their vision is FBS, and Missouri State's gone. Delaware's gone. Those teams are jumping. Kennesaw State jumped. Jacksonville State jumped. Tarleton, they're not a staple in any conference. They're a stepping stone, or FCS is a stepping stone for Tarleton State. And because of the money, Brandon, that Tarleton State has, and maybe UT-Rio Grande might be in that position in the near future, the FBS is where the money is. We'll talk about some of the governance stuff coming up, but around the changing of conference reshuffling, let's kind of just go through Richmond Patriot League this year, William and Mary Patriot League next year. Villanova announced in June they're going to the Patriot League in 2026 as well. Sacred Heart jumps into the CAA after they were independent, making the independent. I don't think this moves the needle very much in the FCS as far as these teams and their movement, particularly. Am I wrong on that, Brandon?
Villanova, I think, is the only one going to the Patriot League. Eventually, when they get there, you think about some of the battles that used to be in the former Colonial Athletic Association, now the Coastal Athletic Association. Notice the eye roll because we're on the video now. Eye roll. Them going to the Patriot League, I mean, they were always that team, and we kind of joked about them last year and previous years about, okay, they get good as the weather gets colder. Now, honestly, you take a look at where the Patriot League is in terms of, teams. I think, Richmond, okay, they'll be good sometimes. Lafayette, they'll be good. Some Lehigh will be good. Some Villanova's supposed to be the blue blood now with the Patriot. And if you're the Patriot League, you sit there and you go, okay, I have my playoff chip. That when we get to those ESPN games in November and December where they're talking playoffs, they have to mention the Patriot League because that's the team that you think can get to the quarterfinals or the semifinals.
Yeah. It's interesting because when you looked at the landscape of the FCS and you had the Dakotas and the Montanas and the West Coast domination, Midwest domination of the FCS, then you start looking, you had Youngstown State, Villanova, Jacksonville State, Delaware, James Madison. Those were your competitors, and they're gone now. And so now that East Coast Southern landscape for competitive national championship contending teams, that's a question mark in my mind. And that's one of the reasons where you got to have a podcast like this that brings in teams from other conferences, because if you look at North Dakota State, South Dakota State, all the Dakotas, the Montanas, that West Coast, they get their podcast, they get their television. It's the South and the East Coast. It just doesn't do justice, Coach Jackson, in my opinion, to the schools that are here, the value that these teams add to college football. And there's some great football. UT Martin has great football. Tennessee Tech played some good football last year. No one talks about it. Mercer plays some good football. I think it's a problem, and I don't know what the solution is, Coach.
Well, if you think about it, there's more schools in the South and in the eastern part of the United States than there are in the, I guess it'd be northwestern part of the United States. And there's good football. They don't get quite the publicity that the Dakota teams do. But I'll say this: With the realignment and the tightening of the footprints and whatnot, the Patriot League. I mean, think about how that affects them. Now they're probably a 2-bid league, possibly even a 3-bid league.
Agreed.
You see the UAC, what they get 3 teams last year. So I believe that they're, I guess you could say, I don't want to say they're catching up. I just believe that there's more opportunities that way. Part of I've always kind of disagreed with some of the selection process because it only came from the majority of the selections came from a couple of different conferences. Now that you've kind of spread some of the bids out a little bit, you see a few upsets in the first round. You see some guys making it to the second and third round. So I would say, that you just got to keep competing. You got to keep getting better. And eventually, I think you will see that tide turn to more of your southeastern type teams that are more successful. One, the weather's much better in the southeast.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. The transfer portal, you would think, would be that that avenue for those players to leave playing in negative degree weather down to the south where it's nice. Of course, we had beautiful weather here, but it can get really hot. I mean, we've had those 110 days in Georgia, Florida, those types of places. But you do think that atmosphere to play football is rich. Southern football, high school is rich. College is rich. The FCS level, it seems like it's gotten lost a little bit, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because the talent gets picked.
Well, I don't think it's so much that. Sorry to interrupt, Coach, but we have to acknowledge the Big Sky and the Missouri Valley are the SEC and the Big Ten, whatever order. I'll let them two play Rochambeau, decide which one wants to be which in the scenario. But you also have to take a look at where have the Southern teams gone? Where have all the Cowboys gone, so to say? Yeah. You take a look at Kennesaw State. They were okay. They get the call to go to FBS. Jacksonville State. They were okay for a period of time, then kind of started to fall off. They made a splash in Rich Rod. They get to call up to FBS. You take a look at the whole landscape. Old Dominion, James Madison, all these Liberty, all these guys got out of the FCS level to the FBS level in the southern region because of a lot of factors, and we talked about it. No point in rehashing old conversations, but there were other factors that all these schools in the South that had the ability to make an impact and to change the landscape and how we looked at this year in, year out at the Big Sky in the Missouri Valley. They got plucked out, and they're no longer here, and there was nobody ready to come in to replace. They took the cream of the crop in the South, and even they went below that and pulled those guys up to the FBS level. And I think that's where the lapse comes in Southern talent, that these guys, they're still going to the Kennesaw States. Georgia is the best per capita football state in the land. Mm-hmm. And these guys are still going to Kennesaw State. And maybe some of these guys do jump up to North Dakota State if I'm going to go play FCS football and NDSU offers me, or West Georgia. No disrespect to West Georgia, but if NDSU offers me, I'm going there. I don't care how cold I'm going to be. And if I've never been on the plane, if I've never been in Dakotas. And then I'm going to get my opportunity to go Big 10, Big 12 after that, because I know I'm going to be successful and I'm going to probably win a natty in 1 or 2 years at North Dakota State.
Yeah. It's interesting. We'll talk more about the landscape next week as we preview some of the preseason games and preseason polls, rather, and just kind of talk about the national championship and its move to Nashville and some of the other cool stuff that's happening there. All right, Coach's Carousel. I'm going to pop up a screen here. You guys can't see it, but it's almost all the logos of all the teams that have had coaching changes here coming in 2025. We're going to highlight just a couple of these teams, coaching changes, rather. And one coach I want to highlight is McNeese. Departing is Gary Goff. They didn't renew his contract. A new hire, Matt Viator, a former McNeese head coach. Homecoming, Viator brings a lot of familiarity to the program. McNeese once proud program coach. You know this because of your time where McNeese was really a powerhouse in the FCS level, Division I AA level. They need a fresh start. They need a good start and a fresh program start. And this coaching move is interesting, going back to a coach that was there previously, but it kind of brings some familiarity with the culture and with the legacy there of McNeese. Matt Viator, the new head coach there at McNeese. Coach, what do you think?
Well, I'm hoping that he gets them back to the level that they were when they were McNeese instead of McNeese.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
you know that that's one of the they're an FCS staple, especially in the South. The FCS is better when they're good. So
Absolutely.
I don't think he's going to have much trouble at all. He's got a fertile recruiting ground. He's McNeese is good to be back in the Southland Conference. They've had some great players. The Davy kid that played there last year is a fantastic ball player. I expect them to be pretty tough. And again, when you're talking about other national championship contenders, at one time McNeese was a national
Yeah.
championship contender. I do not doubt that they'll get back there again.
Brandon, one of the things that was a little surprising was Norfolk State turning to Michael Vick, former Falcon quarterback, Virginia Tech. No real coaching at the collegiate level experience. He replaces Dawson Odoms. And Michael Vick getting his opportunity there at Norfolk State. Not a great program as far as history goes. HBCU, great stadium there on the Chesapeake Bay. Michael Vick's hire. What do you think?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I was around Michael Vick when his brief time when he was offensive coordinator of the Atlanta Legends. Talked to Michael Vick numerous times. He wanted to get into coaching. He loves the idea of coaching. He was just wanting to be in the best situation to learn. I think he knows the game, not from his on the field stuff, but take a look at the pregame stuff he was doing on Fox. I'm not necessarily worried about the X's and O's. I think, when you get into the situation, and we can use McNeese, MacNeese, whatever niece you want to call it as an example, get somebody who knows and loves the program, because that's going to be the selling point for a lot of this. And Michael Vick is from that area. Ties, passion to that community as well. He's a guy there that we talk more about them than we have ever on this show, and a lot of things like that. And you allow him to surround himself with intelligent people that can coach, that can handle some of the gaps he may have as a head coach. So you take a look at what Eddie George was able to do at Tennessee State. Now Eddie George has moved on to Bowling Green to be the head coach there. Deion Sanders, yes, at Jackson State. Now, granted, there was a lot more money involved with putting things around him there in terms of a staff to help fill his gaps, not knowing the collegiate game coming in. But I think the same thing there for Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson as well. These guys have ties that I don't know if you can replicate by hiring, a coordinator from another school to bring them in. They have a name value that still resonates, especially in that local area. And Deshaun Jackson, he may be from California, but he played for the Philadelphia Eagles and played very well for them. So him going to the state of Delaware right next door is huge for them as well. So I think for Michael Vick, same questions that we had when Deion took the job at Jackson State. How will it work on the field? There will be a huge learning curve, but I can say firsthand, this is a guy that wants to coach, that loves the X's and O's of football, and loves imparting it on young people. So I want to give him a fair shot, just like Coach Prime got a fair shot, but it's going to be steep learning curve at a university that hasn't won a lot lately.
Yeah. One of the coaching changes that was a little bit of a shock was Bubba Schweigert moved into an administrative role at North Dakota. They hire Eric Schmidt, the defensive coordinator from San Diego State. Looks like North Dakota is going to really focus on being a more aggressive defense, which is, I think, is really important. Obviously, they're in their conference. And Schmidt, another former UND assistant, so he's got that relative understanding of the culture there at North Dakota. Coach Jackson, teams that hire defensive coordinators, does it always mean that this is going to be a defensive first program overall?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, without question. If you're going to win championships with defense anyway. So yes, and honestly, if it's if it's not a program that's having the success that you want to have, defense is where you have to start. I mean, literally, if you're giving up 40 points a ball game, you're not going to win too terribly many of them if you can't score 41. So yeah, it's going to be a defensive program. And quite honestly, when he was on staff there, they were a defensive dominating team.
Yeah. Yep. And I think they're going to have to turn back to that. And they've had some good seasons. I mean, I think North Dakota is obviously they had some disappointing losses, I think, over that, like kind of Weber State, where they're on the rise, and then they have a disappointing loss, and it kind of derails their season a little bit. North Dakota's on the up and coming. A team that thinks they're on the up and coming, but I'm not so sure that they are, is Sacramento State. They had this big fundraising campaign. They want to go FBS, and they crapped their pants last year. Let's be honest. They had a terrible season last year. Departing is Andy Thompson. He joined Stanford's program. And Brennan Marion, maybe one of the most exciting hires in the FCS. UNLV's offensive coordinator. He's got the go-go offense. He got Haj Malik Williams there at UNLV playing extremely good football. Of course, he was at Campbell previously and then moved to UNLV. Brennan Marion, Brandon Joseph, do you know anything about this coach, this go-go offense? You excited about this for Sacramento State?
I love me some of this go-go offense, but big ups to Andy Thompson. Fail forward. I just, it behooves me. We see this a lot of guys who are really bad, and it's supposed to be at their strong suit, going and finding promotions elsewhere, getting out of Dodge before they have to necessarily pay the consequences for it. Now, for Brennan Marion and Sacramento State, they made a huge investment, and part of it was this push to go to FBS. I don't know if the money that they claim that they have is still on the table, but there's been a lot of promise investments into the Sacramento State football program to get guys in. And they got a lot of players in through the portal for this go-go offense. This go-go offense, it's going to look like something that you haven't really seen. And granted, he was at Howard when Kalen Newton was a quarterback, and they had a huge FBS upset of UNLV, which he ended up being the OC of later on, just until this past year. So there is film on it. There's plenty of film on this, but I think it's going to take a lot of people by surprise. It's just a matter of when it works. It works really well. You're going to have a lot of tempo, a lot of guys moving positions, a lot of mismatches. You're going to have a lot of linebackers on running backs and running backs running full routes out of the backfield. You're going to have mismatches of, safeties on speed burner receivers. It's a lot for a defense to handle. And that's the key to the go-go, because it's so much tempo and it's supposed to wear you down over the course of the game. Enough for the X's and O's. We'll get into that as the season goes on. But for Brennan Marion, how does this play out for year one? We saw this last year, and I'm going to use the example of Florida State. You bring in a whole bunch of transfers at offensive line. You bring in a transfer quarterback, and you expect all those pieces to gel and all this to work out. And guess what? It doesn't work out, and you win 2 games in the season, and it all goes downhill. So there's a very good chance that all this goes downhill, and the Sacramento State funding isn't there, and all the promises don't work. And then where do you go from there?
Well, they say they're still in like 5th gear going to the FBS, and of course they lost to Northern Colorado, which was their only win in 2 years. So there you go. Who you got there on your list? Is that Cole?
Yeah.
What's up, Big Cole?
He says hello.
Me.
An almost 3-year-old who's getting ready to break down some X's and O's.
Heck yeah, he's got it. All right, so we won't spend too much time on this one. ETSU, Trey Lamb jumps to Tulsa. Will Healy brought in. Will Healy, head coach at Charlotte, moved on to Georgia State. Didn't have the success that people thought he would there at Charlotte. It was kind of a bounce-back opportunity at Georgia State and a stepping stone, and now he's going to be the head coach at ETSU. I like the hire. I think they didn't dilly-dally on finding somebody. Coach Jackson, you're in Tennessee. Will Healy, ETSU head coach.
I like the hire for Will. Listen, he did a fantastic job when he was at Austin Peay. He took that program from a winless program and put them on the map. And he did such a good job, he was probably promoted a little bit early.
Yeah.
But he's a fantastic offensive mind. The kids love him. He's going to do a good job at East Tennessee. And I think they probably got a coach that's probably going to stay there for, 4 or 5, at least through the contract. The last couple ones have come and gone, but I think they got one that's at least going to stick through the contract.
those tent stakes get pulled up pretty quickly when FBS schools get start calling
Right.
Trey Lance was all in, and then he gone.
All out.
That's right. All right, Idaho. Jason Eck on to New Mexico. Thomas Ford, the Oregon State running backs coach, comes in. Ford was a rising star at Simon Fraser and now gets his FCS shot. A young coach, strong recruiting credentials. I think we can all agree that Idaho is a huge question mark right now, losing Coach Eck. Brandon, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think, for Idaho, how much of that program was ingrained to the coach, and that's going to be a little bit of a rebuild. I think they're a program that takes a step back based on talent loss and then the coaching change. And guess what? They're not the only one on this coaching change list that I think takes a step back, at least this year. And I'm sure we're going to touch on the big one in just a little bit. But yeah, it's just one of those things where the culture is so ingrained in the head coach, and you had so much talent around. How do you keep living up to that? And it's not the worst thing in the world if they have to take a step back. But as long as he is able to ingrain this new system in there, and it works, it's got to get some talent in there too to live up to this.
Yeah, and Coach Jackson, Idaho, is known for his defense. Well, they lose their defensive coordinator, Dan Jackson, because he is the new head coach at South Dakota State. Jimmy Rogers on to Washington State, and SDSU now has a new head coach, focused again on a defensive culture, powerhouse culture. He inherits the national championship contender. SDSU, a new coach, Jimmy Rogers gone. It's kind of spins everything up for SDSU.
It does, but defense wins championships, and they got plenty of defense left on that team, and the culture's already there. So
Yeah.
the people that come in, all they have to do is carry that forward. So I really don't expect South Dakota State to take much of a step back, if they take a step back at all.
Yeah, I don't either, and I think you're right, Brandon. Go ahead.
Well, that was going to be the school I think does take a step back, just because of the fact of you lost starters, safety, corner, linebacker, that whole defense up and left. Yeah, your quarterback ended up leaving too, and he was once in a generational quarterback for South Dakota State. Now, what's a step back for South Dakota State? Is it? I mean, do you win 10 games and that's a step back? Do you win 9 games, still make the playoffs, and that's a step back? Maybe, but I also think the big thing in what they lost is they lost a whole coaching staff. It's not like, 2 or 3 guys, hung around. I'm pretty sure most every coach left when Jimmy Rogers went to Washington State. So not only do you have to replace the talent, you got to replace the coaches, and you got to hit on all of that to make that work, because you know what? This is going to be a really tough go of it for them, because we saw North Dakota State, South Dakota State, they were ahead of everybody last year, but they weren't so far ahead that they couldn't be beaten. They couldn't get got. Well, you lost a lot of pieces there, and for North Dakota State, did they run it back? Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get closer to the kickoff of the season. But for South Dakota State, it's going to take a lot of check marks for them to be back in the situation they were last year.
And I'll just go to Coach Jackson's point. Will they take a step back? I think the talent that they attract will allow them to stay relevant. Taking a step back, now you got the coaching staff change, and they have to do the job to get those kids ready. I think the talent is going to be there. It's the coaching staff that is a huge question mark, obviously. All right. South Dakota also has a new head coach. Bob Nielsen is retired. Travis Johansson, the University of South Dakota's defensive coordinator, steps into that job. Easy for me to say. His promotion keeps the staff intact. They're going to build on last season's success. South Dakota is now a national contender, in my opinion. The Yotes, I think they're a big deal, Brandon. I don't know that they're going to lose that much. I think they're a team to really kind of circle on the roster. This is a good football team.
Yeah, and coaching changes for South Dakota with Travis Johansson. He knows the program. We talk about this. More importantly, the title that he had, the associate head coach. How much of that kind of varies, depends on the program. But I think Bob Nielsen being there for so long, I don't want to say being up in age, because 65 is not up in age in terms of coaching. Pete Carroll is almost 80, and he's the head coach of an NFL team right now. But I think it was a little bit more of a runway planned here for South Dakota. So I think for Travis Johansson, it's going to be a little bit easier for him to step in there. And as we talked about, it's going to be defense laden. Listen, outside of Brennan Marion and this go-go offense, there's not really many FCS offenses that you're going to go, wow, that's going to shock the world. So you're going to need a good defense, and to have that continuity there with the DC and an AHC, it should lend to what you're talking about, Nathan, of them being prime to have it be more of a continuation than a full change.
Coach, any thoughts on South Dakota's prognosis of this coaching change and what it may mean for the season?
One of my favorite songs is Knee Deep by Parliament Funkadelic, and there's a 4-minute version and there's a 15-minute version.
Oh.
Both of them sound the same to me, and that's about what South Dakota's plight is. It's just going to be a repeat of the last couple of years for them.
Yeah, Coyotes fans, they hope that's the case. All right, just of note, University of Albany's UAlbany's head coach Greg Gattuso joined Penn State's staff. Jared Ambrose, who was on the staff as their offensive coordinator and is credited with that 2023 playoff run and that stout offense, he's been given the interim tag. Likely, if he does well, it'll come off and he'll be hired as the head coach if he can kind of get the Danes up there. But that's an interesting move. It's going to be one to watch because UAlbany, when they're playing well in the past couple of years, they were tough to beat. Tennessee State moved on from Eddie George as he went to Bowling Green to be the head coach there. Reggie Barlow, the defensive coordinator, is now the head coach. He's a proven HBSU head coach. He had the XFL, the Defenders head coaching position before he jumped into the job there at Tennessee State. Brandon, you were around the XFL. What do you know about Reggie Barlow?
Reggie is a longtime NFL assistant, and he's a guy who I believe he was a head coach. Let me look this up real quick. Alabama State beforehand, a long time ago as well. He's a guy who played in the NFL. He's going to be one of those guys that can continue, and I think, Eddie George was great because he was Nashville playing for the Tennessee Titans. I think there was a little bit of a gap of, the coaching, and we saw it the first couple of years for Eddie George. It took a while for them to build, but he got the talent in there, and then last year they were just phenomenal, and it all came together. Well, if there's any, juice still in there, Reggie Barlow is going to squeeze it out, and it's going to be for him what he lacks in being able to sit in kids' home in that Nashville area in Tennessee and have that name value. He's going to make up for it on the field. He's going to be a field general for them in terms of commanding a locker room and making sure these guys are prepared inside out. So I think it's going to be different, but I think the Tennessee State success can continue under Reggie Barlow.
All right, we will see what happens as we move into our next segment, which is all about governance. NCAA Division I. Well, we were kind of waiting for the ruling to come out in April, the night committee and all the committees, and we kind of talked about it towards the end of the year. And I like just on the field X's and O's and football. I don't like all this stuff that the NIL is. It's just all kind of craziness. But they have come up with a solution and some rules that looks like they're going to allow teams to opt in and opt out of, and they've already done that. I'm going to put up on the screen. You guys cannot see it, but what it's going to say is the feature and the opt-in institutions and opt-out institutions as far as this annual revenue sharing scholarship limits, right, Brandon? It's a $20.5 million raising the 4% per year revenue sharing if you opt in, but you have unlimited roster cap for scholarships. And the roster limit is 105 for football. Now, if you opt out, no money, but you have your traditional NCAA limits of 63 scholarships and no new caps on your roster. Teams have come in and said they're opting out of this, opting into this. What does this whole thing mean, Brandon?
It means that, barring congressional interference, we're not done with this in the short term. I mean, for what we're going to see on the field, especially at the FCS levels, they left it up to the conferences to set if they want to enforce some sort of roster limit at the FCS level. In terms of the grand scheme of things, in terms of how this relates to the FBS and the FCS, if you're not opted in, you're not on the radar. short term speaking. If you're not opted into this settlement, don't expect if there's any conference, wanting to add at the FBS level that you will be included in the conversation. Now, you can decide after this year to opt in. They kind of left it very loose that teams can just opt in for the year and year in, year out to see how this works. What we're going to change on the field, I don't think anything crazy at the FCS level in the short term, at least coming up this year. I don't think we're going to see, anybody jump up and do something crazy in terms of, roster limitation, depending on if their conference will allow it. What it also does is it clears a hurdle, something that we've been talking about before, the further reform. Just to kind of give a too long didn't read on that. I mean, where we are standing on that right now is, as everybody thought on July 1st, the pigs were going to fly, the roost was going to get raided, and everything was going to be wide open. That was never going to be the case. They are actively working on trying to figure out some framework to where there is some sort of enforcement. Now, there is some sort of enforcement on the NILs, be due to a collective and oversight for that. That's step one. Step two is going to be, how do we govern this? And that's going to be, I hate to put this, as an FBS focused topic, but that's going to be the trickle down of this. The Big Ten and the SEC will determine the playoffs.
Yeah, that's the weighted voting, right? This is what they're talking about, that weighted voting and the revenue and stuff, right? Okay.
Yeah. And if they determine to go to a playoff format that excludes, most of the group of 6 at the FBS level, well, guess what these guys are going to do? And Tony Petitti, the head of the American, has said this. If push comes to shove, we will create our own form of championship. If we need to, we don't want to. We feel like we should be involved in the college football playoff, but if we need to, we will. And that will be an opportunity, and that will have trickle-down effects on the FCS level. Now, they've talked about, hey, let's have some kind of governance where we allow the Power 5 to do whatever they do, and they will be oversaw by a different committee, and then everybody else, whether it be FBS, FCS, will be the new FCS or Division I AA and have their own championship model. But like I said before, if you think some of these schools in the American Conference want to do business with some of these schools, that don't carry their weight, let's, just throw some of these schools out there that don't carry their weight in the FCS. That's not going to happen either. So there will be a trickle-down effect, but that is on pause right now. They need to figure out how this first year is going to play out in terms of the house settlement, opting in, playing players, and now with the hope from a lot of these universities that the government oversight will come in.
And this whole weighted voting, and you mentioned you've got conferences, even the ACC, talking about, wait a second, how are we going to be affected by this? American, Conference USA, they already have proposals pen to paper already ready to go to vote on if this thing goes sideways real quick. And I don't think there's going to be that slow of a turn for some of these conferences, Coach Jackson, if they decide that, hey, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, or whatever is going to be have their own playoff, and then everybody else can go after the bowls or whatever the situation may be. And then the FCS funding is all kind of everybody's going to be kind of in a state of panic. But I think they've already got plans in place. And how that affects the FCS, I don't really know. You've got Ivy League and Patriot already opting out of this. I think Southern Conference has said they're pretty much going to opt out of this by conference. And I don't like talking about this stuff because it is complicated. And anytime you have all these lawyers involved dealing with it, writing, opt-in instructions and opt-out instructions and all kind of crap, you do have to pay attention to the small font. But Coach Jackson, just as a purist, as a college football purist, how does this make you feel that this whole administrative side of college football has really taken the spotlight from just what goes on the field?
Well, the FBS is going to do whatever it wants to do, especially the Power 5, Power 4, whatever you want to call them. They'll do whatever they want to do, and they really don't care how it trickles down. I've talked to I've talked to a bunch of FCS coaches, and this is what I can kind of understand is one of their big concerns is the difference in the roster limits. Yes. So if you opt in, you've got 105. the way I understand it. Most of the times they're going to have 115, 120, maybe even 130 kids on the team. Well, the ones that are over 100, 105, those are all basically walk-ons that are paying tuition to go to school there. So they're a little concerned about losing a little revenue there. And, you know, I know you can opt in or opt out, but I believe it's how they'll handle your rosters. If you're an FCS school that's got a little bit more money and you can fully fund 105 scholarships, well, that's going to put you closer to the Dakota schools in trying to play for the national championship. It's also going to help you out in recruiting for some of these high school kids that aren't getting picked up because of the transfer portal or whatnot. So it could help you on further down the line. But I really don't. At some point in time, I hope we get to talking about kids still graduating and going to school and getting a college education and getting a college experience, because that's how it is for 70, 80%
Right.
of college football.
Well, and
we keep talking about the needle, not necessarily the haystack.
And I think this whole conversation has an academic base to it, right? They want to get back to academics and not make this all about the money and kids transferring and so on. So it is interesting. But Brandon, before we jump off this and wrap up the show, how does this FBS schools pay FCS schools to come and get their butts kicked once a year? How might this affect the scheduling in these FCS schools who may be shunned because they're opting out, may not get the paychecks? The paychecks may dry up. That could be a problem, right?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a non-written agreement or an unspoken kind of nudge of, okay, if I got to, and these schools call them charity games, and there's just no other way to put it. That's how the FBS views this, how Georgia views every time they play an FCS game. They call it their charity game. If they have to figure, if I'm the University of Georgia and I got to schedule a charity game, okay, am I going to give it to a school that isn't opted in to this? Because guess what? Everybody had to pay as part of the settlement. Everybody who opted in paid into the pot. No, they're going to cut their $1.5 million check to somebody else who opted in. They're not going to cut a check to somebody who didn't opt in. And that's if these games even continue, because there's a general thinking of moving forward. If the Big Ten can force the SEC go to 9 conference games, that leaves 3 games left. A school like Georgia, they have their annual rivalry with Georgia Tech. That leaves 2 games left. They normally have a relatively big non-conference game there, and that other game would come against a G5 school. They would want to play. The Big Ten has an idea, a proposal out where the SEC and the Big Ten will play kind of like we see in basketball with the ACC, SEC, Big Ten Challenge, where you play one every year. That would go on there. That would be 1 game. Remember, their annual non-conference game against Georgia Tech would be 2. That third game would be at worst against a G5 school that is playoff eligible. So there is proposals floating around that would eradicate even this FCS, FBS matchups, at least in the power conference levels. Now,
Right.
The group of 5, group of 6 schools could still play those games, but that's where we're going. But to answer your question point blank, if they have a chance to give their money to somebody who opted in, that joined into this, and somebody who didn't, the money's going to the school, the university that opted in.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to watch. There is a vote on August 5th, which is just a couple days from now, and that's going to solidify probably what they put together there in July. So one final tidbit for the FCS is that they have approved a 12-game schedule for most of these teams. Quick thought, Coach Jackson, on a 12-game schedule, good or bad for FCS?
It's fantastic. It gives you possibly another home game. That's a little more revenue for my school.
Brandon?
If it's going against another FCS school, great, because it would help us figure out who deserves to be in the playoffs or not.
All right. Well, that will do it for the FCS Checkdown. Big thanks to Jonah Goldberg for joining us. And Coach Jackson, Brandon, thank you guys so much. Brandon, I know your head's spinning with traveling and moving, so thank you so much for coming on. We have a big season scheduled here for the FCS Checkdown. We thank you guys so much. I do have to do the proverbial like and follow us on YouTube, subscribe, like and rate us on Spotify if you like the show, and always be very active with us on FCS Checkdown. We're going to bring some of you guys on.
I'm going to have a new background every week.
All right. Challenge accepted. For Brandon Joseph, Coach Jackson, I'm Nathan McCray. This has been the FCS Checkdown. First episode 2025. Let's go.